You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
The Department of Homeland Security is apparently on a huge ammo buying spree. This is a just-placed order for more than 300,000 bullets, just the latest in a series of contracts that could add up to more than 1.5 billion rounds of ammo over the next 5 years. Critics say that's enough bullets to supply the equivalent of the Iraq War for 24 years.
Well, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, along with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, have placed a large and rather interesting order. They've ordered 450 million rounds of ammunition to be created and delivered to them over the next 5 years. Now, the company Alliant Tech Systems, or ATK, was awarded the contract to manufacture 40 caliber ammunition, high-performance bullets. Apparently, these bullets, quote, provide optimum penetration for the terminal performance, referring to the way the tip of the bullet passes through barriers and expands, all the while holding its jacket in its toughest conditions. So this is interesting because this is not the Pentagon making this order for the military. It's DHS. And to give you a little perspective here, there are only about 311 million people living in the United States, so it begs the question, why such a massive order?
Urban military training exercises are becoming an increasingly common sight in many U.S. cities. The Department of Homeland Security has spent the past year acquiring more than 1 billion rounds of high-performance ammunition. Do these developments suggest concerns over a potential terrorist attack? Are they preparations for widespread social upheaval? Is there perhaps something even more sinister underway? Military veteran and independent journalist David Bard reports that he spoke with a man identified as an insider at the Department of Homeland Security who described urban warfare training as, quote, desensitizing exercises all across the U.S., adding that, quote, we're being prepared for mass civil unrest in major U.S. cities. DoD will be expected to help when we're requested. Significantly, the Reverend Jesse Jackson recently held a demonstration in Chicago, a city plagued with the highest rate of gun-related murders in the country, in which he called for the Department of Homeland Security to conduct armed street patrols to restore order.
Republican Senator Tom Coburn triggering our Washington Watchdog report, and ABC's Jonathan Karl has what is in his report.
The zombie apocalypse. This isn't some really bad B movie. It's an actual scene from the 2012 Counterterrorism Summit attended by law enforcement officials around the country. Summit tickets, $1,000 a pop, paid for with your tax dollars. The zombies look scary, but organizers say the skit was solely to add levity to an otherwise serious meeting on protecting the homeland. Senator Tom Coburn says it's just another example of more than $7 billion in questionable homeland security spending every year.
It's blown, wasted.
In a new report, Coburn cites example after example, including nearly $30,000 for an underwater robot in Columbus, Ohio, the $69,000 hovercraft for Indianapolis, and this, the sleepy town of Keene, New Hampshire, citing the need to secure its annual Pumpkin Festival, was awarded a grant to buy a Bearcat armored vehicle, price tag nearly $250,000. Department of Homeland Security told us its grants, quote, make our communities safer places to live. Coburn says there's just too much waste.
So the examples you cite here are the tip of the iceberg? Sure. All over the government, everywhere you look, is what? Is waste, incompetence, and stupidity.
This is our bucket of blood. From gore, we actually use real pig intestines,
to the downright disgusting.
and then we fill them with water and oatmeal. They look like intestines, so this is what your intestines look like.
These are the makings of a zombie apocalypse.
We're gonna have a lady with a baby and the umbilical cord hanging out. Some people have intestines in them. hanging eyeballs, broken arms, a little bit of everything.
Your makeup's going to be more intense.
Muad Al-Faraji is a zombie in the making.
The meanest one of all.
Al-Faraji will join about 40 other ghoulish friends in the third world village, where they'll bring on the apocalypse.
There's a lot of creativity that goes into it.
Kit Lavelle's with Strategic Operations, the company creating the gory battle. They've been creating scenarios like this for the last 10 years.
All of our people are very well prepared. They're professional. They've done this over and over again. Using all the movie-making techniques to make these kinds of training situations extremely realistic.
Strategic Operations has trained some 600,000 military and law enforcement members using this technique.
We've got it down to a science, if you will. If there is such a thing, it's an art, obviously.
Al-Faraji has technique of his own.
When the zombies come, then you're to react, okay?
Come stage time, he'll be ready. Just one thing.
I don't want him gonna get shot. Yeah, I don't want to get shot.
We have your location confirmed to screen. 4 live Overwatch. Time on target status to me.
Get inside the building. Covering.
Look seriously needed. First one. Message chat. 8 zombies. That's 1. Zero. One go on the you need support.
Grab the asset.
DHS supplier provides shooting targets of American gun owners. Paul Joseph Watson has this shocking story about how Law Enforcement Targets Incorporated is producing cardboard cutouts of, quote, non-traditional threats. Of course, this is on the heels of the federal government purchasing in excess of 2 billion bullets for non-law enforcement, non-lethal agencies. What the hell is going on? They're producing targets that say do not hesitate, of children, of pregnant women, of elderly men, in summary, of society's most vulnerable and typically most innocent citizens. You just cannot believe these cutouts, but they produce them, and you've really got to ask why, on the heels of Homeland Security and other agencies preparing to deal with the American people, openly stating they consider them to be potential extremists and the enemies in the event of an economic or civil unrest event, anything really they can use to justify a total literal occupation of America through Homeland Security and related agencies. Now let's roll some of those incredible cardboard cutouts, again, that they say are going to be used by law enforcement who need to get over their hesitation factor for enemies they may encounter, quote, for the first time. And the obvious question is, why is there such a demand for these items, which again show nothing other than old ladies? There's a child with a gun, maybe 6 or 7 years old. There's a pregnant woman photographed in a nursery who's the target. Now, why is the officer there with the drawn gun in the nursery in the first place? Does he have a warrant? Has there been due process? Why does he consider this pregnant woman to be the enemy? Why are they planning to take down vulnerable and ordinary Americans? This is really bizarre, and it really should strike a nerve. Something unsettling is happening. This is on the heels of more and more gun confiscation, which we've heard again and again from sheriff, law enforcement, and from Americans in general that they won't put up with, they won't tolerate with, they won't cooperate with, because we have the Second Amendment, because shall not infringe. Democrats introduced a bill to allow police to search home of gun owners. This is happening in Washington State. You've got Senator Adam Klein of Seattle as one of the sponsors. He considers himself a strong civil liberties issue-minded representative, but claims he didn't read the bill that he, of course, sponsored, even though it was only 8 pages. The bill, in addition to its other banning of, assault weapons and clips and so forth, calls for, under SB 5737, the 1 per year visit by police or law enforcement to search homes without a warrant, of course, to see if people have indeed turned in their assault weapons that are, again, banned under this bill. It's caused such an outrage, such a stir, that liberal Democrats in the state and across the country say they're ashamed about the bill, and say because of the bill they can see why their friends on the other side of the aisle, why their friends who are Second Amendment defenders are so freaked out by the attempted legislation that they're attempting to shove down the throats of Americans in every state in this country and at the federal level. But of course they claim this was introduced by accident, and they have egg on their face, and they didn't really mean it, and they're going to back off. Yeah, you can imagine it probably ended up there for a reason. Oh, by the way, could we have a bill to sponsor legislators to have elementary education so they can learn to read? Could they even be trained to read the Constitution and maybe abide by it, and not introduce and sponsor legislation for unwarranted searches of American gun owners' homes just because they say they're civil liberty-minded people? It's disgusting.
Well, the U.S. Army has built a fake city in Virginia for what they say is to prepare their troops to occupy foreign countries. But what's striking is this 300-acre fake city looks more like your average American town. It cost $96 million to build in just 2 years, and it includes a sports stadium, bank, a school, and an underground subway. They say it's in order to train for unspecified future combat scenarios. But the fact that the subway carriages even carry the same logo as they do in Washington, D.C., this could suggest that the site was built to double both as a foreign city and a mock domestic town. The site also includes what they're calling a mosque, but it looks eerily familiar to a Christian church. So they're saying this is for foreign occupation. Please, come on. They are training for martial law, civil unrest. They have already been preparing for the gun owners and the Christians and anyone with an anti-government attitude to be trained to be seen as an insurrectionist. They're already training the military to see patriots as insurrectionists. The writing is on the wall. It is time to get real, folks. No matter how much the mainstream media and the Obama administration tries to convince you that they're just trying to take the guns because Sandy Hook, y'all. Please, the writing is on the wall. It is time for us to wake up, and that's why I would say it's an unprecedented move that Fox News is now carrying InfoWars articles covering the very fact that the DHS is arming themselves. They have up on foxnews.com Paul Joseph Watson's article about the Homeland Security purchasing those zombie hunter bullets. Now, the mainstream media, they've covered our material before, but they'll typically just take our material and then accredit it to their own writers after they do their own research. But what's really big here is it's Paul Joseph Watson's actual article credited back to InfoWars. It doesn't just have some vague reference to a, quote, conspiracy website. That's because this is a fact. This is an unprecedented purchase of ammunition that makes no sense. Fox News can see the writing on the wall, and this is facts. Anyone can go look that up on the Fed BizOps site, something where they're looking for FEMA trailers. That's all there. It's fact. Just go look it up like we do. Do you really think, though, that a government that's, they have no problem killing innocent children overseas or using chemical weapons to destroy an entire country and the nation's genetic makeup of their children's children, do you really think that they're not going to turn on you or they're going to have some problem offing you and getting rid of you? Absolutely not. You're the zombies. That's why they need the zombie hunter bullets. It's probably funny to them.
A newly leaked U.S. Army military police training manual for what they are calling civil disturbance operations. The Army manual outlines the plan to kill rioters and demonstrators in America. That's right, they have plans to confiscate our firearms and kill American citizens on U.S. soil. This during a mass civil unrest, which of course will be engineered by the foreign banks who now run our military. Warning shots will not be fired. Use of deadly force authorized. And this, of course, is the top story right now on Infowars.com. The PDF document, which is dated in 2006, well, it was used for a self-learning course at the U.S. Army Military Police School at Fort McClellan. And it makes it clear that operations apply to both inside and outside the continental United States. The document outlines how military assets will be used to restore and maintain law and order by shooting protesters, I guess, shooting innocent civilians perhaps. And it goes on to describe how prisoners will be processed through internment camps. Wow. So there you have it. Our own military being trained for armed conflict with U.S. citizens. They're being trained to confiscate our guns in preparations to process us into camps during civil unrest. And we are now joined by Dan Feit, who is an investigative journalist for HongPong.com. He's also a graphic artist and web designer. And you initially broke the story, and I was wanting you on today. I was wondering if you could briefly go over the document and tell us how you got your hands on it to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, all the credit is really due here to a really excellent website called publicintelligence.net. They do a really good job systematically finding obscure and limited access files from within the U.S. military and other institutions. I just saw it pop up yesterday and quickly wrote a summary of it for my own site to get that distributed and out there. Essentially, this document ties to a number of other documents which I've been involved in researching. In my personal experience, I covered the 2008 Republican National Convention and the 2009 G20 conference in Pittsburgh through the G Infinity Media Center, that was independent media that was put together. And so what we have here is a system of expanding, emergency use of domestic military personnel. And at one level that I found the research on earlier, there's something called Con Plan 3502, Civil Disturbance Operations Concept of Operations Plan run by the U.S. Northern Command. And that was what we found earlier. And Public Intelligence has also helped pull together some other documents from that. And so what we found here was essentially the military police training document to instruct the military police in a number of different important aspects of this general domestic operations planning, including domestic searches without warrants. There's no reference to warrants or those type of constitutional rights in this. This also includes various aspects of crowd control, area control, riot control, and some really kind of terrifying statements about how military-operated detention facilities inside the United States would be protected by lethal force, including the statement that warning shots will not be fired in the event that someone is trying to escape. As soon as they deem a risk of lethal injury, they're just going to shoot you. And it's helpful to have these things on paper and concrete to establish the different levels of this planning structure. And I think that what we're going to see at the Republican and Democratic National Conventions later this year, which are national special security events, we're going to see very similar planning frameworks activated that are very reminiscent of this. And this document is from April 2006. It was used at the Fort McClellan, Alabama, U.S. Army Military Police School. legal, and I would presume there's probably been a few tweaks to this document since then, and I was able to find an earlier version of the document from many years before. I think it was from the 80s. So this has been revised before, and there's a lot of continuities. It involves a lot of stuff about troop formations, certain riot control weapons, things like that, as well as it talks about how a task force set up domestically would have its own PSYOPs unit, and psychological operations, I believe, are not legal for the U.S. military.
Well, let me stop you right there for a second, because I thought that was one of the more interesting. The whole thing is interesting, and I'm still combing through it. You know, I just got access to it today, but it talks about internment camps where internees will be re-educated. Okay, they talk about into developing an appreciation of U.S. policies. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? I mean, so if you and I don't agree with U.S. policies, we're out there protesting, how are they going to re-educate us?
Yeah. I think that's the earlier document that you're talking about. That was more specifically in detail to the management of the detention facilities, which surfaced a few months ago. This one is a little bit more general than that. It doesn't go quite to that. It mainly has to do with saying this is our escalation of force inside the detention facilities. I didn't notice anything about it getting to the re-education of people, but it does get to the degree of force that will be enabled. And it also talks about how things like gasoline, firearms can be restricted. And I think what we saw during Hurricane Katrina, which happened right around the same kind of time as this was released, that the military was behaving in much the same way. They were attempting to seize firearms from people without Fourth Amendment warrants and procedures, and because probably they were trained as military police to not worry about the Fourth Amendment in terms of things like firearms. It also gets a lot to military intelligence, analyzing protest groups and things of that nature. So it's really at a broad kind of like ground level, sort of grunts, MPs, like this is how, in the situation of large riots, this is what we would do. And so in the 1990s, during the LA riots, the old plan, which was called the Garden Plot, which was Con Plan 3502's predecessor, would have entailed training very similar to this in terms of how they were, trying to manage crowds and that kind of thing. And so I think what people need to look at if they're trying to research into this is what are the parameters of this intelligence situation when they're going to collect intelligence. This doesn't talk about advanced agencies like the Defense Intelligence Agency or the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which does a lot of, kind of compiling of data together. And I just think that while this shows a very certain heavily militarized tactics, it shows, when they line up people that are suited up as riot police, these are the psychological tactics to intimidate protesters and that kind of thing, as well as, again, run detention facilities that are patrolled with lethal force. I'm
looking at the document right now. Definitely a show of force, intimidation. Primary function of the military will be breaking up unauthorized gatherings. They're going to be patrolling the streets. They're going to be looking for any disturbance areas, prevent lawless acts. I wonder what they consider an unauthorized gathering. This is crazy. Military forces will be present to show, like I said before, a show of force, intimidation. They will establish roadblocks, which they're already doing in California, by the way, to stop drunk drivers. And they will break up crowds, employ crowd control, conduct street patrols, and, this is scary stuff. Tell us about some of the deadly force and the non-lethal force. What kind of weapons will they be using?
Well, essentially they're authorized to, what they say is defend themselves or defend against serious elements of what they call critical infrastructure, which could be any like large corporations or banks or that kind of thing. It's a real a broad spectrum of things which they're essentially authorized to use force under. But what's frustrating about these documents is that they really are clearly not written in reference to constitutional government or limited government at all. Like there's no representation of the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. For searches, the right of of people to, possess firearms in civil
because
emergencies.
It's martial law. Because it's
Right.
martial law, everything's out the window.
Yeah, and there are direct references to the phrase martial law in this document. They say that, well, only under curfew could the military, under federal control, really, only under martial law could they impose a curfew, but we will definitely support local officials when they're running curfews. So everything that's sort of like underneath a full-scale martial law, like this is the kind of pattern and the kind of information which you should review and have a good sense of whenever you feel like you might encounter, any military acting domestically, even if it's not a full-blown, complete martial law scenario. They're still going to kind of be acting along this pattern, again, as we saw in Katrina. So as we want to try to get an understanding of these things, as well as hopefully intervene politically and get these kinds of things revealed and out in the open and not secret. I mean, I think personally, if we're detained in military facilities like this thing lays out, we do deserve warning shots. Like, could we demand that from our congressional representatives? We have to basically look at how to reform these policies, as well as obviously, showing everybody, the public, elected officials, and everyone, and good people in the military and bureaucracies too, that this isn't okay.
That's exactly it right there. We need to get this information out to all our friends and family who are in the military. Because, our military is waking up to this as well. They're starting to come to the realization that they are working for the offshore banking cartels who run them and who are turning them against their own people. So, and I for one, have friends who are in active military as both veterans, and they're simply not going to stand for it. So, in closing, anything else you'd like to add before we go?
I just think that everybody, can do this kind of research. A lot of primary source stuff comes out. Sites like publicintelligence.net and cryptome.org is another really good one. You find a lot of really excellent gems, and then people need to pick these things apart, pass them around, start finding new ones, and start trying to suss out new sources, because they're trying to clamp down on leaks, right now as fast as they can and build a much tighter secret government. And it's really important for all of us to work against that, because we can clearly see from this kind of documents that the planning is not really congruent what we think of, as an open society, as a limited constitutional government. We can clearly see that's not the way that these kind of things tend to be set up.
That's right. This is a related document that was also recently released. A leaked U.S. Army document prepared for the Department of Defense contains shocking plans for political activists to be pacified by PSYOP officers into developing an appreciation of U.S. policies. So there you go. Those people will be detained in prison camps inside the United States.